This is this I was like, I wonder if people will be bored with this. And then somebody pointed out, they said, hey, I've been using Argo CD for 5 years and I always find new methods. And I will say, sometimes these 101 sessions, um, I've had several people come up to me before for a 101 type session like this and be like, you know what? I've been doing this for like 4 years, and there was something in there that I had never understood or we had always done wrong, and it never made sense. And suddenly it was like clicked. So we'll see if
I
we
do,
can do
I
that.
do, and I do want to call out John from Octopus Deploy, John Bristow. He is, I think it's once. I'm not sure if it's once a month or less
He does
frequent
it
than
once a
that.
week.
Once a week, Octopus Deploy 101,
Yeah.
once a week, and he's saying that every week he learns new stuff, people learn new stuff. It's like, and it's not the same even session. It's fairly each session is different even though it's the same content. So I do think it's super beneficial, especially for newbies, for me, because when I followed the Get Started guide, I had tons of questions, tons of issues, and then I realized that there is so much content out there. I felt a little bit lost, and especially when it comes to local testing, which for me it's one of the most important stuff to do,
Yeah.
local testing. There are so many tools. I realized I wrote something about Kind, and then I realized that there are several articles about that and about other tools. So I really think it's one of those crucial sessions to have.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, when it comes to how, when it comes to engineering in general, it's so vast that there will always be, no matter how like super amazing senior staff, blah, blah, whatever you are, I don't care who you are, you will be in a room on the regular where someone brings up something that you've never heard of before. And you'll always be like, oh, shoot, like I should have known about that. But it's always like, it's just that like this field is so vast. There's so many little technical little rabbit holes you can get down into. So it's it happens to everybody. It happens to me all the time. People are showing something and I'm like, I have no idea what that is. I've never seen it before. And even like sometimes I'll get Argo questions and I'll be like, I don't even know what they're talking about. And sometimes there's after clarification, it's more obvious, but and then sometimes it's like, you guys are using this in a way that I've never used it before. And so there's like a question mark. So it's big, and even the most, seasoned time spending person doesn't know it all. So anyway, throw your comments in, throw your points in. I see that our biggest audience right now is on X, but I see people tuning in from YouTube, from Twitch, from LinkedIn. So thank you everybody for joining. We'll jump into this 101 session, and we'll start with the getting started. So in order
I
to
will just say one
go
thing.
ahead.
I
Yeah.
am monitoring the comments, so at any given time, if anyone has any question, feel free to drop them, and I'll stop Dan and ask the question.
Okay, perfect. So I have already, I've got kubectl installed. I've got a kube config set up. I don't need to do anything with micro K8s. I'm going to be using Kind. So installing Argo CD is just creating a namespace and applying the installation YAML.
Dan,
And there are,
do you plan to install any local tool, or have you already installed?
yeah, I already installed Kind. So I'm just
Okay.
running this cluster locally for me where I'm at. And we're just coming in right after the installation has happened. I actually did a few other things in the background that will come up as we go along, but this is where you start from. And I've got a repo that I'm not really even going to be using too much of it here, but we'll do a little bit of it. And thank you, Moran, for the shout
Yeah.
out. Keep up the good work. Let's do it. Okay. So now that I've got this thing going, and we can go and look inside of, I've got a couple namespaces here. You can see these are actually, some of these are old. I've been using this cluster locally on and off for a little bit. And I actually had Argo CD installed here and then I updated it and cleared everything off of it. So just going to look at all my resources here. You can see that I've got a bunch of replicas, deployments. Some of these deployments are old, but if we look at the pods, they're all were right before we started this demo. So I basically erased everything. I have an extra cluster connected to it, which we'll talk about in a second. So there's some reason for that. Now, if I want to start using this, I need to connect to the Argo CD service. And right now, everything is cluster IP. So there's not a way for me to get to it except through port forwarding. So the default, what I do most of the time is I just set up a port forward to service Argo CD server in the namespace, and I set up a local port 8080 to point at the SSL port 443. And if I do this, now I can go and get access to my instance. Now I'm actually logged in, which means that it's not going to prompt me for my password right now. But if it had, the way to get that is when Argo CD is installed, it creates a secret that has that in it. So let me get out of this port forwarding really quick, and let me grab this secret. So this is the secret. It's the Argo CD initial admin secret. And this is the command that I have memorized and always use, which is, and it's like sitting in my bash history, because this will pull, this will extract just the password for me and put it, it will decode it using base64, and then it will dump it into PB copy, which will put it into my, my paste, so I can paste it. So it's like hitting Control C, Command C. Paste bin. What my clipboard puts it in my clipboard. I was like, where the heck that thing is called?
Control C, Command C, all of the above.
But you can also, and I've also abbreviated kubectl to K using an alias for convenience. But that's just me. It's not a big deal. And then if you just examine this file and we just output it in YAML, you can see it just dumps a base64 encoded password here. So that all that command does is specify which path to get out, which is data.password, decodes it, puts it in a thing, puts it in my thing above. And then the default user is admin. There you go.
And that's how you logged in.
Yeah, that's how I logged in.
Okay.
So now that I'm in here, we're in the famous Argo CD UI. And a lot of people, when they use Argo CD, they cite the UI as being really nice. And I think it's honestly just because a lot of us are so used to using tools where maybe there's not a UI. And so learning it takes a little bit longer because you have to read more documentation and you have to learn all the commands. And in Argo CD, it's just easier to just come in and just start doing stuff.
I think it's also very intuitive and simple.
Yeah, it's very simple and intuitive. I agree. So, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create an application and sync it. So let's create a new app. And oh, wait, I'm offline. Why am I offline? Because I'm not port forwarding it anymore. So I'll show you one other little trick that I do.
But how come you run this command already?
No. But I was running it, but I exited it, right? Because I was running it in the foreground. So I need to run it so it sticks around. So this is the little bash that I use for me personally. Now you can expose the service too, right? But and I'm using a kind cluster, so I could expose this service just on a local port and just use that. But I like to use this because first of all, no hup means it's going to run in the background. And then it runs this command while true, do this port forward, and sleep 5 done. So what this does is if that port forward crashes for some reason, which I find that kubectl port forward is unreliable and it does crash, it will automatically restart it. And then it's going to take a process ID and dump that into a local file so that when I need to delete it, I don't have to go and figure out what the process file is. I can just delete that. So that's all that is that I'm going to do. You can see this one's doing to port 80 instead of 443. It doesn't I mean, 443 is encrypted, so it's better, but I'm all local here anyway, so it just doesn't really matter. So,
Okay.
all right, now that I've done that, I can refresh this and I'm all connected back in again using localhost. So let's create a new app. And by default, Argo CD is going to be able to deploy to the cluster that is currently on and installed on. So let's create a new app. And I'm going to do...
Do you need to specify the namespace here?
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we will. So I'm going to do demo app. And I'm going to take this one from inside of the Argo CD repo. What am I doing here? There are a bunch of example apps, so you can actually see
examples.
You can see examples, and so you can deploy these just when you're starting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first grab the repo, and I'm zoomed in here so that hopefully you can see everything, but it makes me a little confused when I'm navigating around because I'm used to seeing more. But we're going to leave the project name as default, and you can create projects basically just have permission scope to them. So if you create a project, you can specify what clusters it can deploy to, what namespaces it can deploy to, what teams have access to do different things there, if they can view everything, if they can't view everything, all those kinds of things. We're going to leave sync policy manual, and we're going to come back and explain what that is, and we'll talk about this finalizer too. But let's just skip all that stuff. We're going to keep it really simple, and we're going to put in our repo URL. It's going to be pointed at the head of the repository. So this is the in our case, it's the master branch, and it's going to be the latest commit there. And then it's going to load for me some paths, and it basically pulls the repo and it looks at all the examples to figure. It basically pulls and looks for any folders that have Kubernetes manifests in them to deploy to. And in this case, I'm going to use the... Oh, wait, did I say examples or example apps? Wait a second, hang on. I can't see enough. Where are my example apps? Oh, I'm sorry. I was saying use the Argo CD repo for example apps. We have a whole just repository of just example apps. So let's use that instead. So I just got a little mixed up here. No worries. All right, so let me update this. We're going to point at the example apps repo. Okay, now we've got a bunch of paths. This is why I was like, oh, what are all these other apps in here? And I'm going to use Helm Guestbook to start off with. And my destination is going to be the local host, which is kubernetes.default.service. So this is just the Kubernetes DNS designation. And we're going to put this just in the default namespace for now. We have a bunch of Helm options. We're going to skip all of these for the moment. And if we hit edit as YAML, this is going to show me what this application is going to look like. So you can see there's actually not that much stuff that we specified, right? It's destination and source. So where am I pulling the manifest from, and where am I deploying them to? And if I save that and hit create, this will generate the application. Now, right now, it's showing up as out of sync and missing. So this application, there's no resources in it. So if we look in here, we can see that Argo CD has determined that there should be a service and a deployment for this application, but they are not here. And that makes sense because we haven't synced it yet. So let's go ahead and hit sync. And there's a bunch of sync options. We don't really have to do anything here. You can see that it's specifying which resources are going to be synchronized. And if there were resources that were in sync, they would show us that they were in sync. So you could see just the resources that were out of sync. And we have a couple of options. So we can skip schema validation, which we talked a little bit about earlier. We can talk about respect and ignore differences, which we'll talk about in a second. So let's just hit synchronize for now. And
why do we need to do it manually?
Hit sync manually
Yes. Is that
because
because of the way you configured it in the first place?
yeah, because the sync policy that I have set is manual. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that is from the spec standpoint, a blank sync policy means it's manual.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we want to automate it, we're going to edit it to make it automated. So now I've got my sync set up, and maybe I can zoom out just a little bit on this. You can see I've got some pods. I've got all my endpoints have been created, and I can jump into the pods, and it's going to show me, or any resource, it's going to show me the events. So, for example, this one had a failed health check when it first started, and then it successfully started and passed and was good to go. We can also look at the logs for the containers in here, and so this is like where a lot of people are like, Argo CD is dope and it has a great UI because it shows me everything that's going on, and I can just see all my resources. I can look at logs. And so for especially when you're new to Kubernetes, just getting insight into what's happening on your cluster is just so much extra work. And like, I don't know, Revital, have you ever looked at the Kubernetes dashboard that ships with Kubernetes?
I haven't.
Yeah, see, nobody does. And in fact, most admins like disable it because one time Tesla shipped a Kubernetes cluster that had the dashboard open by default, and so some people got access to the cluster. So that was not bueno. So anyway, most people don't look at it. So Argo CD provides a way that we can just access all this stuff and see what's going on. And if I were to edit a resource, and I can actually do that in here, and you can disable this too, so you can tell people they can't do it. But if I were to edit this resource, and let's change like, let's change something stupid. Let's not change the pod, actually. Let's change it on the deployment. So let's click onto this guy. We'll go down, we can look at the YAML, and you can see there's no diff right now. It's empty, which is why I can't even scroll down and see it. So I can see the desired manifest, the live manifest. Let's edit this. And I'm going to change this image to latest. Okay, that's a big no-no in the GitOps world, right? Because if I change an image to latest and it doesn't work, I can't roll back to a previous version of the image because it's always been set as latest. Okay. So I just saved that.
So what would be the best practice, to really specify the number of the version?
Yeah, it's to specify the image, like the version of the tag, and it should be, you should treat it as immutable, right? It should just always be the same. Yeah. Now here it's going to show progressing because this pod hasn't been created yet, and it may not even exist. And I think if I hit sync, oh yeah, it does exist. Okay, so there it goes. Went and created it. So now I have this existing, but you can see there's no. I
have to say something as a newbie.
Yeah.
For you, it's like, that's the UI, but I'm seeing those green hearts, and the UI is just fantastic. It's designed very, very well. I really like it.
I like the UI too. I'm not trying to downside down.
No, of course not. But you're just used to it. I'm not used to it, and I'm amazed.
Right, just to see the health of resources and stuff, right?
Just amazing. It's beautiful. I love the green color. I hate to see reds. So
yeah, and we'll make some stuff red, right? But if we go back and look at this deployment, you can see it's gone back to 0.1. Well, what happened? Well, when I specified it as latest and I saved it, it updated it automatically, and it created the new resource group to pull this pod. And guess what? That tag doesn't even exist. And so if I look on the events, we can see image pull back off. Okay, so there is no latest tag for this image. And so it's going to sit here and it's going to try forever to try to pull that image that doesn't exist. So if I built it an image and pushed it, eventually this would succeed, and this app health would move from progressing to healthy. And we can see that of all our resources, the deployment is out of sync, right? So if I sync it, it's going to erase my change and put back the configuration that was supposed to be there. and now we can see this previous version that I had done manually is gone. That is the
will be
power.
now
What were you going to say?
The version will be now the previous one, the 0.1, if I remember correctly.
Now it's back to that 0.1
Show
version. We
Prove
don't
it.
believe you.
Prove it.
And
Okay.
actually, let's here. I'll show it. I'll show it this way. So let's go and we'll hit edit again, and we'll go down to this image. See where it says 0.1. Let's put it back to latest again. We'll save it, and when we do, again, it creates it. But if we look at the deployment, now if we go down and we look at this diff, it shows us exactly what has been changed.
Fantastic. Amazing.
This is so powerful, right? Because there's there's people running around like they could be editing live resources, right? And you don't have a record of that. You don't have a trail of that. You don't know what it was supposed to be. So if you have it in Git, then it's like, okay, like that thing was edited. I'm gonna go, change it back or whatever, right? So it should be fixed. So now that I've done that, I can. All right, let's sync this back up. Good to go. Everything's fixed.
Everything is healthy.
Everything's healthy. And let's edit this application and let us change. Let's change our sync options. So we're going to enable auto sync. Okay, enable auto sync. And this is going to give me a couple of additional options. One is going to be prune resources. So this means that if a resource is removed from Git, the resource will automatically be removed from the cluster. And that can be scary because a lot of people will be slow to do that because like, oh, I don't want to ever delete anything. But you have to remember, it's like, well, why was it deleted from Git? Like if it was deleted from Git, you should have a good process that makes sure that stuff isn't erroneously deleted from Git. And that's just as important.
But Git is their source of truth, right?
It's the source of truth, yeah. Okay. So by default, if you don't enable that, if it's deleted from Git, it will show it as out of sync, but you will have to manually do a synchronization and enable pruning to delete the resource. Okay. And then let's leave self-heal off for the moment. Let's save this. Okay. So now let's go in and edit our deployment again. And so we're going to go down to the live manifest. We'll hit edit. We'll change this. Let's make it 0.2 this time. Maybe there is a 0.2. Maybe this will succeed. Okay, we save it. We go back and we can see that it looks like it did. Oh, it did succeed, right? It succeeded. Now it says out of sync. And then you say, why is it out of sync?
Yeah, it was supposed to be happen automatically, right?
Because I turned on auto sync, right? What the heck?
Exactly.
But if I look at it, I see there's a diff. I see it's got 0.2, not 0.1. That is because when you enable auto sync. Oh wait, did I not save it? Hang on. Gotta move my boop boop boop. There we go. So let me. Yeah, didn't I edit it? Isn't it fine? Did it go away again? No, it's there. Yeah, I want that too.
You did not enable the self-heal.
But I didn't enable self-heal. Why is that important? Because sync policy automated means it automatically checks for updates in Git. It does not overwrite changes made to live resources. So for that, we have to enable self-heal.
But why do I have these two different flags?
So automated means that if Git is updated, then it will automatically update my application, right? Mm-hmm. But what if I want to be able to edit resources in production without having those changes get overwritten? Well, if it only pulls updates from Git when Git updates, and it doesn't make it lets me do whatever I want in my live, then that might be a desirable condition if I'm like debugging or something, you know, or
Sounds scary, complex.
well, it's basically two different things, right? So self-heal means that if somebody changes something in production, I'm going to automatically overwrite that change. Okay? You might want to be able to make edits live in Kubernetes for whatever reason. Maybe you're
Like
testing,
hot
maybe you're
fixes and
debugging.
stuff?
What's that?
Like hot fixes and stuff?
Yeah, maybe I have a hot fix that I'm doing. Now, I'm not telling people that they should or shouldn't do that necessarily. I'm just explaining what Argo CD supports. But with self healing, the other thing that will get lost are controllers that are running. So let's say you have a pod autoscaler and it detects that there's a lot of demand on this cluster for more of this kind of pod. It will automatically increase the number of replicas, right? Well, if self heal is turned on, it will go and say, you're not supposed to have 2 replicas. You're supposed to have 1, and it will erase it. So let me show you what happens when we turn on self heal.
Okay.
So let's enable self heal, and we're going to go back and look. It has already deleted my change.
Yeah.
Right? It's saying you were not supposed to do that. And if now I go in and I edit and make a change, and let's actually do the replicas example, right? Now if I change this to 2 and I save it, it's going to run, scale it up, and then immediately overwrite that change and sync it off the cluster. It might take a few seconds to do that. Oh, replica's 1 right here. Oh yeah. What's this one doing? Already present, created, started. Oh yeah, it got deleted. There it goes. So yeah, you just saw it happen, right? So the other way to work with this, and this is one of my favorite features in Argo CD, is to use ignore differences. And what I can do now, this is not a feature that you'll see in the UI. You have to put it in the YAML. So I can show you here. Hang on.
Desire gold is that it will be shown in the UI, or it's like by design?
By design.
Okay.
It's not something that should be edited in the UI typically. So what I can do is I can go to my manifest here and I can edit this. And under my sync policy, under my spec, I'm going to add ignore differences. And actually, I have one pre-written here. So this is going to take deployments, and it's going to ignore differences in replicas. Okay, so let's save that. Now that I've done that, I can go in and I can edit my deployment again. And I can change my replicas to 2. It's going to scale up, it's going to progress, and it's going to show that it is currently in sync. Okay. And if I go in here and I look at the diff, it's not going to show any diff because we are ignoring differences to that field. This is another incredibly powerful Argo CD feature because what I have essentially just done is I have delegated authority over that replica field to my pod autoscaler. So that pod autoscaler is scaling up, scaling down, doing whatever, and it's taking care of it.
Wow.
and changing the replicas, and it's not going to overwrite it. And if I look at my manifest again here, oh wait, I'm back on replicas too. What happened? Didn't I just ignore it?
You did.
Oh, I edited it. Did I edit it in the wrong place? Maybe I did. Anyway, that's what it does.
Okay.
So yeah, you can specify ignore differences, and it will do that. And so you can do that. Very common to do it for like replicas, but any other thing you can do it specifically. Like, for example, what's that security tool called? That makes it so you can't deploy things. What's it called? I can't remember.
ChatGPT.
No, it's called dude, there's something wrong with my age or something that is a problem.
Let's ask ChatGPT.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, it's a tool that will basically you can set up policies like don't allow unsigned containers to be added. Use security policy signed containers. And there's two main tools called it's OPA versus which is Open Policy Agent, Gatekeeper, Kyverno. Goodness gracious. I didn't even find it in my search. It just finally clicked. But anyway, so like Kyverno will update your annotations as part of its tracking stuff. That'll show up as a diff. And so Argo CD will start erasing it, and then the Kyverno policy will put it back, and then
Who would win?
and then suddenly, you have 10,000 apps, and you're like, oh no, like the entire thing is crawling to a halt because there's this huge turf war going on. And it's like, oh, I just need to add ignore differences. And that's why when you enable controllers, not a bad idea to have sync policy turned to manual while you do that. There is a way to do that with sync windows. So you can introduce a sync window. Again, that's a not in the UI, but a sync window you can specify like don't allow any sync during the next 24 hours, and then you can install controllers and have it show you all the diffs that's creating, and then you can go through and like fine tune, ignore differences and stuff. Okay, so this is okay. We got an application deployed. We explored that view. What if I have resources on my cluster that are already deployed and I want to take those on? Oh, I like that Moran was over here in the comments like, it's Kyverno, bruh. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. So, for example, that I have one thing that's not this demo app deployed on this cluster. Can you guess what it is? What's one thing I have on this cluster deployed that's not showing up in my apps right now? Give you a hint. We were looking at it. It was this guy. This is the hint. Rovital?
I'm looking for comments.
Oh. It's Argo CD. Okay. Argo CD is not showing up as an app, right? But I can actually manage Argo CD using itself. And I'm going to do that by creating an Argo CD app. So I'm going to create an app called Argo CD. I'll leave it in the default project again for now. Let's leave sync policy on manual for the moment. Auto create namespace is always a good idea because if the namespace doesn't exist, Argo CD can just automatically create it. In this case, it already exists because the resource is already there. But now I'm going to grab the Argo CD source. Let me find where is the source for Argo CD? Oh, I just thought I had it written down here. Hang on. Okay, well, I'll just grab it. I'll just grab it from here. So we had it in here. We just looked at it, right? So the installation is right here, and it's under stable manifest install. So I'm going to go to this guy. Great. Keep it on head, and the path is going to be stable manifest install. Okay. And we're going to send it to the local cluster, and we're going to send it to the Argo CD namespace, and we will create that app. And what did I put in wrong?
Repository not accessible.
Oh, because I did the raw. manifest here. Sorry. That my hint was that it didn't populate automatically with the path. So we'll give it a second it's going to download that repo. There it goes. And now we should be good. The path, this guy. I actually don't ever use the UI. Isn't that funny?
Really?
No. I mean, not to create apps. I always just do it.
Through the CLI?
No, I always do it directly in Git.
Mm.
So anyway, it's what did we say it was? It was because I put stable in there. That's why. Because I specified. Okay. So I was including the revision was stable, right? So that was the release that I was targeting was stable.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it in the URL, right? That I snagged this is specifying where in the Git tree I'm looking, right? So I'm looking at the stable release. Anyway, so all right, let's see if we got it now. No. Guys, I'm like an expert. I'm so good at this. Do everything perfectly the first time. All right, let's look at it. App path is absolute. It should see manifests. And
Is it the backslash that you have had there?
No. Backslash should be fine. This would get everything inside that manifest, but I only want to get the
YAML. Let's see.
Let's go look at it really quick. Didn't know there was a tutorial about debugging basic things, did you? Part of it.
There you go.
Install that YAML. Doesn't help that I can't see it very well from where I'm sitting.
Do not specify the file, Mike is saying.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of files in there. I don't want to deploy all of them. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it is. It does need to be pointed at a directory. Mike is right.
Okay.
But there's a directory that has it single lined like that. Thanks, Mike. See, that was just a test for y'all. See if you were paying attention.
Yay.
And we got there. Yeah, you can't. That's right. You can't just specify a file. It needs to be a path. So now we can see blah, 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 blah. It's created. And you can see there's a bunch of stuff that's out of sync. But it should show me like for this one. So if we look at these and we preview the difference, you can see the only thing it's adding is a label marking that the instance is Argo CD. So this instance is talking about the application that owns the resource. So if I sync this, all it's going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to add that annotation everywhere to all the resources. So now they're under management. So now I've got Argo CD under management. And if I wanted to change which version of Argo CD was deployed, I could literally go in and change the destination, the target revision from stable to like a specific version, for example. So I could do like 2.14.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And 2.14 would be the same thing. I could specify whichever specific version that I would get. But so anyway, there you go. That's another cool thing you can do with Argo CD is you can actually have Argo CD manage itself And once you've done that, then you can actually go in and use Argo CD to look at your logs, right? So let's look at like repo server, for example. Not the service. Let's look at let's filter to for a second. Let's click on here because I'm using it on a small screen. It's actually kind of hard to use zoomed in like this.
Yeah, it's hard to see as well.
Like it would probably look like this if I was a fun. So yeah, over here on the left, you can see it's got the filters. So I can add a kind in here and say only show me the deployment. Like how to make a demo harder than it needs to be. All right, so here now I've got my deployments. Great.
Yeah.
I can look at repo server and I can look at the logs and see what repo server is doing. So I could actually go back through here and find the error where I was specifying the wrong part of the path.
We have one comment worth mentioning: the risks, like what happens when you by accident remove the Argo CD config map.
Ooh, yeah. So that's
by Moran.
What would happen if I removed the config map? I don't think removing the config map would immediately cause a problem, but that config map needs to be there to mount the options when it starts stuff. So I don't think it would. Moran, do you think it would just delete everything or something? Because I think if you removed that config map, it would just make it so you couldn't start new stuff. Right? Let's delete it and find out. Okay, we're going to delete this resource. Moran's furiously typing, don't. Okay, we deleted it. Now, is Argo going to immediately crash? Oh, it does immediately crash. Whoa. Yeah, so don't do that. That's a problem. So yeah, we'll put a config map back. Bloop. Yeah. Yeah, if you're not self-healing, you'll need to reply it. So, would it self-heal then? It probably would. Okay, so let's sync it. So again, all we're doing is retaking ownership of everything. Bloop. Recreated. Let's actually try and see if it says self-heal. Now I'm into the experiment here. So let's enable self-healing. Okay. And we'll talk about a very important principle in a second, but now we've turned on self-healing. Let's just verify. Right, sitting there. Self-healing's turned on. Let's delete it and see if it will come back with self-heal turned on. I kind of think it wouldn't. If it crashed it, you would think that it would struggle to put it back, right? Moran says, oh no, I'm not sure. Don't do it. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna come back. I think that CM needs to be there. Yeah, it is a real 101. Luckily, getting Argo CD back is pretty quick. Now there are some other implications of like if you have one of the options you have, for example, when you create an application in Argo CD, is that, and look, since I brought it back, it already self-healed and re-put back all the annotations. Is that when you create an app, you have the option finalizer, and here's the thing that happens if it adds a deletion finalizer. It means that the resource needs to be accepted as deleted by Argo CD. But if you delete Argo CD, then it might delete the resource automatically, the application. And if Cascade is turned on, then it deletes the resources. So, pay attention to that kind of stuff. I gave a whole session on deletion at KubeCon. So maybe we can throw that link in there in a minute. But it was just like a guide to like an Argo CD and how it works. But yeah, that was a good one. So the things that I wanted to come back to in here really quick, we talked about these. Ignore differences. We talked about server-side apply a little bit. We talked about creating a namespace. I don't want to get into prune propagation. Oh, there is this option to replace. And replacing is a pretty common thing you do in Argo CD, or sorry, in Kubernetes in general, is like, oh, this resource, it's immutable. I can't update it. So I need to delete it and recreate it. And that's totally fine. But there is one resource that you probably should be very careful before replacing, which is a CRD. Because in the chat, what happens when you delete a CRD? Do 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 do. It's the people on LinkedIn going to be the most proactive on the commenting. The people on Twitter are doing less commenting. What happens when you delete a CRD is it deletes all the custom resources that it's attached to. So if you do a replace on a CRD, it deletes the CRD, marks all the custom resources for deletion, and then that CRD gets recreated, but all of those custom resources get deleted anyway. So don't replace don't do that. Don't unless you want to. Okay, so this is actually really cool. Now we've got Argo CD self-managing, so we can access the logs. We can do all that stuff. There is a feature in Argo CD. We talked about viewing logs where we're looking at a pod and we're looking at logs. There is an option to also allow an interactive shell that by default is restricted, because allowing an interactive shell and running containers in production would be like a big no-no. That's a burr. So that is a break glass to enable this feature, but it is such a cool feature. I use it regularly when I'm like debugging stuff locally or just in like a staging cluster or whatever. So it's a great feature that we have and have had for a long time. Okay, so
I would like to raise another question that was asked. I have installed Argo CD in a private AKS cluster. What could be the reasons for the error I'm experiencing?
I've installed Argo CD on a private AKS cluster. What could be the reasons for the error I'm experiencing? And they shared the error up here.
Where do you? Okay.
I've created a DNS entry and mapped the Nginx ingress load balancer IP with it, but I'm getting a 502 application gateway error. Well, clearly the problem is DNS, as it always is. So
how do you suggest that we can debug that? He can debug that.
He's pointing to the load balancer IP, which should work. First, I would try to connect to the load balancer IP and make sure that it works. If you're using an ingress, I'm not sure why you're using a load balancer IP for Argo CD, because that's like the whole point of an ingress is you don't need one. So you should be, if you're setting up a DNS entry in your Nginx ingress, then you should have it just pointing to the service for Argo CD. Make sure you're pointing to the right service. Look at your ingress logs, see what error it's throwing, because there's clearly like an internal DNS that's not working. It's not pointing to the right namespace. It's not pointing to the right service. Argo CD itself doesn't care. Someone says it's not DNS. There's no way it was DNS. It was DNS. Yeah, every single time. There is and I don't know if it's an AKS thing, but there is also like DNS. DNS is baked into Kubernetes by default. And so when we point to like kubernetes.service.cluster.local, that's using the internal DNS of Kubernetes itself. And so if you're when you're following that formulation to talk to stuff, if that internal DNS isn't working, that would be a problem. But I think in your case, it's most likely that it's just not pointing to the right service. So great question. Keep them coming. And if somebody in the comments has a better answer, then by all means, go for it. Okay, so what were you going to say, Rubital?
I was about to say that that was a fantastic demo. I'm positive we can spend hours and show you more capabilities. Do you have any
But you want me to stop, is what you're saying.
In other words.
Okay. Yeah, let me wrap it up with a couple of things. First of all, in our apps, we can also pass values like Helm values. So when we were creating that demo app, I don't know if any of you were eagle-eyed, to see it, but when it detected that it was a Helm app, it actually said, okay, here's all the values that are currently sitting in that values file, and you can go and manually update and change those. And so you can actually create overrides inside of Argo CD. So that's a cool thing you can do. But another thing you can do that's really powerful is create an application set. And an application set. So here I've been creating, first of all, okay, wait, before I even, hold up, rewind, come back. We're looking at 2 applications that have created, right? I've created these only in Kubernetes. These do not, the manifests that are deployed, those exist in Git, but the configuration itself, like this configuration, this YAML configuration, where we look at the manifest, this doesn't exist anywhere. So I always tell people, I can put this in Git too, and I can put an Argo CD application at this, and now all of my apps configurations are defined in Git, and that pattern is called an app of apps. It's an application that points at a whole bunch of apps.
So it's not an application set.
It's not an application set at that point.
Okay, I remember those 2 terms from the GitOps course that I was doing, which is fantastic because most of the terms that you're using, I've learned from that course.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so that course was doing its job.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, but you can point at that app of apps and put all of your resources, all of your application resources in there. That's why when I was saying, like, I don't ever really use the UI, I am always just doing it directly, because creating an application inside the UI is in some ways dangerous, right? Because the record of how I've configured this application isn't recorded anywhere by default. I have to go through an extra step to actually make sure that that's recorded somewhere. So a lot of Argo admins, the very first thing, they come in, they learn Argo, they're like, this is dope, I love this, and then they immediately like disable the new app button because it's like, don't use that. This is like one of the first features we built in CodeFresh was we made it so the new app button commits it to Git. So you'd be like, okay, go use the new app button, and it works, and it doesn't create problems. But I've talked to people who have been doing this for a long time, and they'll be like, oh, I have like 500 applications, and none of the application configurations are in Git. And so if their cluster was gone, if that CD got wiped, they would lose all that configuration, and they'd have to go and rebuild everything from scratch. That sucks, and it's terrifying. So definitely, like, this is super fun to play around with, but make sure that you have some strategy in place to make sure that this stuff is getting committed to Git. Because if it's not, you're going to be, then you're missing disaster recovery, and it's a problem. And also there could be changes here that I could make. Like, I've been editing these apps willy-nilly in the UI, right? But those are all changes that were not checked into Git. But once I have the YAML in Git, then I can go through that whole process. Okay, so that's point number 1. Now, point number 2 is application sets. So that's an app of apps. You have an application pointing at an app. We also have this feature called application sets, and this allows for the programmatic creation of apps. So, for example, I can say one of the generators for an application set is called the pull request generator. So let's say I've got my Git repo, and I want to allow people to test. I want to test their pull requests before they come on. So what I'll do is I'll use an application set pull request generator. And so every time somebody opens a pull request, it will automatically generate a new application or set of applications that will get deployed, and I can run testing against and doing all that kind of stuff. And you can do an application set for Git repositories. You can do it for a list. You can do it for clusters. So this Argo instance that I have here, I actually have 2 clusters connected. And so I can say every cluster that I have connected to automatically go and deploy these sets of applications. So it's incredibly powerful. There's so much more you can do with Argo CD, but I think this is like the 101, class 1, 101. So hopefully that's helpful. I know we're like over time by like a lot.
I have one question by a lot,
Sorry.
but
I was just going to go for like 2 more hours. Sorry, Roberto.
I know. When will you use apps of apps, and when will you use application sets?
Yeah, so I use application sets for things that would be tedious for an app of apps. So like a pull request generator, I don't want to go and run like a CI pipeline to automatically generate an application and commit it every time, right? That I get one of those. I want to just have an application set that just monitors that and automatically does it for me. Same thing for clusters. But an app of apps, I'm using when I want to manually create. I want to manually create applications where I specify the stuff and it's not programmatic. Thanks, Mike. But you can also have application sets leverage app of apps. So you can have an application set that deploys an app of apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's very common for people that have like, oh, every cluster that we deploy, it gets Kyverno, it gets these policies, it gets Core DNS, blah, 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 whatever. And they use an application set. And then every time a cluster is added, it automatically deploys those applications and syncs them. That's very common. And you can also put application sets sources inside of app of apps. So you can have something that bootstraps application sets from an app of apps. Yeah.
Do you agree to that comment?
When you start with app of apps, when you learn about app set, you stop using app of apps. Yeah, it's a maturity thing. So we have a great blog post that Kostas did that we recommend that you get to a point where you actually don't really use app of apps, or that your primary interface is via application sets. And that's mostly, and we'll throw the link in the description. We'll throw the link in
the comments.
In the comments, yeah. But that's really because it allows you to do much more scalable repository organization. And that's really important. But for most users, they get there, like it takes them a good amount of time to get there. So I have the link. Where do I put it in the chat? How do I put it in the chat?
You can use, I think it's a banner. Create a banner.
Oh, create a banner. Okay, here. I'll put it. Do you know where the green room chat is? It's where you click on the people to the top, to the side. Sorry, internal stuff. Click on the three people and then click green room chat, and then there's the link. So, yeah, we do. That is like kind of a maturity sign, is like you've reached a very high level of maturity, is if you're using only application sets. But for everyday operation and stuff, and by the way, application sets leveraging app of apps quite often. So it's not like you don't ever use app of apps once you use application sets. Oftentimes you'll use application sets to generate app of apps. So that's like a totally common pattern that we see. So